But also, as we have been following every week for many months now, there's fighting on the Netzarim corridor. And if we look at map C here tomorrow, we can see the Netzarim corridor. Thanks again to Maxwell for throwing these maps together. It's very handy for everybody to see what we're talking about. You can see where the U.S. Army Pier is in the Netzarim corridor. Last week on the show, I told you that the pier was gone. This week, the pier's back. In my notes that I made from a couple days ago, I said the pier is back, and then I crossed it out. So the pier is gone again because they dismantled it for a day to fix it. Now it's back again. By the time you watch this segment, maybe gone again. Unclear. It's all just cynical theater. Open the crossings, end the siege. The pier is ridiculous. It's not a military asset for the Americans or the Israelis. It's a piece of humanitarian theater happening during a famine and a genocide, and it's a cynical use of American resources. Bothers me. Sorry. So we're going to focus on the Netzarim corridor resistance here, because the Netzarim corridor is, as I've showed on previous shows, they have fixed military positions along. The Israeli military has fixed positions along this corridor that are just constantly under fire. Incidentally, the pier is not one of them. Palestinians are not interfering with aid coming in through the pier, despite the fact that the pier and aid trucks were used. At least aid trucks that looked like trucks that were used on the pier were used for the massacre in Nusrat. They also used in the massacre in Nusrat, they used a vehicle packed with belongings that they said were coming from Rafah for people fleeing. So just the perfidy of the Israeli military. But in any case, we're going to focus on the Netzarim corridor because this first operation here tomorrow, number 15, this is a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 Brigade's mortar operation. We see the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters with eyes here on the IDF's 99th Division command post. You can see the vehicles going back and forth there. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is going to set up 2 mortar teams here and fire on the command position with 60 and 120 millimeter heavy mortars. And then we're going to watch here. You can see them set up the shot, but after here, you're going to watch ambulances and medevac helicopters again show up, because the Israeli military in this case did admit casualties, 5 casualties in this operation, at least 2 killed, at least 3 severely wounded. So these mortar operations, which I don't show all that often on the show, but there's 7 videos a week like this, literally. And in the earlier war, there was even more. They're not just firing and closing their ears. These are, and we're going to see that in the coming footage. But you can see this is the medevac not being fired on. You can see that's the medevac ambulance not being fired on. We just saw that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 has mortar, that they've calibrated their mortars to hit these spots. And there goes a Sikorsky heavy helicopter. They have flares, but when they're coming up off the ground like that, you could hit them with one of those SA-18 𝐓𝐡𝐞s that 𝐓𝐶 𝐤𝐜 just showed us in the previous video. You could fire that on them, and they don't. You could fire sniper rifles. You could use the Al-Ghul sniper rifle, that has an effective range of 2 kilometers and has an incendiary round, armor-piercing incendiary round. If you put one of those rounds into the helicopter explodes. So it's very clear they're not firing on the medevacs. And that's the final scene there says the mortar fragments are waiting for you from 𝐓𝐡𝐞. And this was along the corridor. And again, 5 casualties, 2 killed, 3 severely wounded, according to the Israelis, from that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 operation. We look at number 16 here is 𝐓𝐡𝐞 with 114 millimeter. These are 𝐓𝐡𝐞's rocket artillery, built by 𝐓𝐡𝐞. You can see them here setting it up, and it looks like they're just firing it off dirt, and they're not. We'll see in the coming videos how they calibrate this. But I just wanted to bring in this one quote from 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿. He's the secretary of Kibbutz Be'eri, and he says part of the reasons, which is right across the border from the Netzarim corridor. Part of the reason we are not returning is the crisis of trust between the army and our residents, and we need to restore it. I would say that that trust in the state should also be restored, but that will be more difficult. So that's the secretary, the settlement leader, the mayor, essentially, of Kibbutz Be'eri, saying that they're not going back to the envelope until the army reinstills trust in their institution that was dismantled by Qassam on October 7th. And we've been watching for 8 months as its only achievements are massacring civilians. But this is the kind of rocket fire you see right here, which is part of the reason why the Israelis are not going back to the envelope, the Gaza envelope, anytime soon. And that's why the country of Israel is smaller. It's smaller than it was on October 6th because of the envelope. It's smaller because of the north, where Hezbollah has made effectively a closed military zone that's 10 or 15 kilometers deep. So I just wanted to bring you that. Actually, the Magen David, the Israeli Red Cross, they did announce on this one that this was being fired on Ashkelon, just where everybody in Gaza is from, Ascalon. Now called Ashkelon. It was fired on them there, and the Magen David ambulance service said 2 people tripped and fell on their way to the shelter, which is something that, for people who have tracked this war for the last 20 years, will remember. The Israelis used to count their casualties so comprehensively that they would report trip and falls after rocket attacks. They would say, 16 trip and falls after that rocket attack on Tel Aviv. That was 10 years ago that they used to do that. We used to mock them for that. And now, 10 years later, they get hit so hard, so regularly, that they have to lie about their casualties. The opposite of acknowledging trip and falls, they lie about their casualties because there's no faith in their institutions. There's no faith in the IDF. They have a conscription army that they need people to have faith in, to go and fight, and to be forced to go and fight these wars that everybody, I think, will be pretty unanimously saying that the Israelis lost this war. Just the same way about the Americans in Iraq or Afghanistan, the Canadians for that matter. So yeah, let's look at number 17 here tomorrow, because this is where we can see, this is the Abu Ali Mustafa brigades, the PFLP. Here you see what they do. Qassam doesn't show this, but you can see the angle finder there. He's setting the angle finders, calibrating it. He's got a compass. He's got a map. With like a grid map, so that he can calculate where yesterday's shots landed. They have a spotter that calculates where the rocket artillery landed, and reports back, and they calibrate and they shift based on the compass, based on the map, on the mathematics. This is the mathematics of artillery, the mathematics of mortar fire. It's more complicated than I understand how they're doing it exactly. And even the mortar units tend to debate all of the different ways of calculating the math of how to execute an accurate mortar strike. But we saw 2 videos ago that they are accurate with these strikes. And these are fragmentation weapons, which means they explode into small pieces that fly all around. So they're dangerous, they're harassing. And this is the thing that 9 months into the war, these fighting groups are able to do. And this is the PFLP, the Marxists, fighting here with Sarai al-Quds, the Islamists, which is not unusual or surprising, even though it might sound that way to uninitiated audiences, that the leftists and the Islamists would fight together. But that's happened for decades. And there's leftists in Islamic Jihad as well. Often fighters will join a group, an organization, based on their military capacity or based on their relationships in the camps that they grew up in, or based on their role in the groups. So the armed groups aren't an effective way of strictly categorizing people's political beliefs, because there's many fighters from the PFLP that would join the Qassam brigades in the 2005, 2006, when Qassam is starting to build up a national army. You'd have leftists that would join the 𝐓𝐶𝐞 brigades. In the same way that you have leftists in the West Bank join Islamic Jihad in the Second Intifada because Islamic Jihad had the resistance capability to carry out operations. So it's not just a simple way of categorizing people. And these joint operations aren't just for the cameras to show unity. This is actually what's happening. And these are being fired on the Netzarim corridor. All these videos are being fired on the Netzarim corridor. And you can see them calibrating their position, their firing positions, because they're moving their firing positions every day, whereas most mortar units are in a fixed place in normal armies. In other armies that have access to resources, your mortar units would be stacked with ammunition, and you would continually use that ammunition from a fixed position that you're firing from. But it's inverted in Gaza. In Gaza, they're firing a small number of ammunition from multiple different spots, but they're firing at the same target. So what you're seeing with the compass and the calibration and the angle finder is they're setting from multiple days of information to recalibrate the new position of the rocket. And they're putting the angle finder on the rocket so that the rocket launches on the right angle for the right trajectory to land where it's supposed to land. And that operation was the Israeli military admitted that operation, this is a video from the 16th of June that was only released a week later by the PFLP. And the Israeli military admitted that, it's this one, sorry. Is this 17 tomorrow? Yeah. Is this 17? Yeah, in any case, one of these two, 17 or 18, yes, there's Tamara. Thank you, Tamara. So this actually hit an Israeli howitzer, and the howitzers are the guns, the big guns that fire the 155 shells that Layla was talking about raining down on Hind. They fire these. This is what people are talking about when they talk about artillery. They're talking about a howitzer gun that's on the border in relative safety, firing into a camp full of people who have nothing to do with the battle, who are just trying to survive in a tent camp, and they're getting 155 shells rained down on them, made by the Americans, GPS guided, so they're landing exactly where they intend to land, right in the middle of a tent camp. And so this PFLP operation with Soraya, they hit one of those howitzers, and the Israeli military admitted that they lost those howitzers, that one howitzer. And those howitzers have fired hundreds of thousands of those shells since this war began. They had claimed that they had fired 100,000 155 shells, like in the first months, going back to late November, early December. The war only began as a ground war, October 27th, something around there. So you're talking about using thousands of these a day. So they were able to hit them. Is this number 18? These three videos essentially tell you the same thing, and it's interesting to see all three of those. Yeah, so you see here, he's got the compass on the mortar map, mortar math maps. You can see it there. It's magnetic, so it sticks to and they get the angle, they get the distance, they calibrate the distance, and then they attach the fuse. See, and then the fighters here with both their bandanas, the Abu Ali Mustafa brigades and Soraya al-Quds, putting their bandanas there over the weapons. Is a very again chivalrous thing to do for each other, and they're saying that text there, saying they're firing on the Netzarim corridor. They're constantly going to fire on the Netzarim corridor. The Netzarim corridor is open season, and the longer the Israeli military stays in the Netzarim corridor, the more these operations are going to take place, and eventually, well, I won't predict the future, but the longer they're there, the more spectacular, large-scale operations that can take place if you give time, to dig your tunnels. Which we just saw actually just before I came on air. 𝐓𝐶𝐞 released a video of them literally digging the tunnel right now. I have a deadline for 𝐓𝐶𝐞 of Tuesday night for the show, though, so we're going to have to show that one next week because it just came out. But you can see there the Netzarim corridor under fire constantly there. So thanks for that, Tamara. I got a little mixed up which one was which, because there was 3 of them that were pretty similar, but they all have the same point, that those mortars are being shot with significant foresight, calibration, mathematics, geometry, a bunch of things that terrify me to try to explain to people. I hope I did an okay job for any of you mortar or artillery units out there listening. But that's the mortar and artillery operations on the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 corridor. And that wraps up the resistance report for Gaza.
Thanks for watching this video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, hit like, leave a comment. These engagements help us with the YouTube algorithm, and it helps us to get around Silicon Valley censorship as much as possible. It does make a difference. You can also support our journalism by going to electronicintifada.net and clicking on donate now. Thank you.